Good morning, sixth grade. Let's see, we want to go over a couple things before we get started into our notes today. Remember, we will have a review Thursday at 1 o'clock, same time for y'all every week. The day may change, but typically I'm going to keep y'all at the 1 o'clock review time. A Zoom review, 1 o'clock Thursday. You will have a test on Friday. If you have not gotten me your test yet, please do so from this past week. Please do so if you're having an issue with it. Once again, any kind of problems you're having, please communicate that to me, email me, let me know, and then we'll work with you in terms of getting the test in. So please let me know about that. All right, hope everybody's doing good. We're starting page 329, section 3, strengthening the monarchy. This is a section that we're actually going back a little bit in the book. But this is a section we did not get to, and I want to get to prior to the end of the year. All right, AD 1337 through 1453, England and France fought a series of bloody conflicts known as the 100 Years' War. France and England have been traditional enemies for a very long time. They fought amongst each other a bunch throughout history. But in this case, centuries... they fought to keep, the English did keep French lands inherited from the Normans, while French kings wanted to unite these lands to their kingdom. All right, the English inherited from the Normans when William the Conqueror conquered England, 1066, Battle of Hastings. We covered that earlier in the school year. But they were fighting over these lands. The English during the 100 Years' War did win a couple of major battles early on. The English won battles at Crecy in 1346 and Agincourt at 1415. These victories were in large part due to the longbow. The characteristics of a longbow that you would need to know is they're about as tall as a man. So roughly 5 feet, maybe a little bit taller than that. They were light to carry. And they could shoot arrows capable of piercing armor from around 300 yards away. That's a big deal when you have an army charging at you, if it can pierce armor and go, at that distance. It also took years to master. It wasn't something you went and trained a couple weeks or 6 weeks and you had it and they sent you on into battle. It actually took years to master the long bow. But it was a weapon that really made a big difference for the English. At the Battle of Agincourt, the French heavily outnumbered King Henry V, and his men defeated the French in large part because of the longbow. That's what you'll need to know. You'll need to know King Henry V, Battle of Agincourt. And I have that in your notes. During the 100 Years' War, probably one of the more interesting figures that came from this was Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc was a 17-year-old French peasant girl in 1429. And she claims to have heard heavenly voices that called down to her to save France. She winds up getting an appearance in the court of King Charles VII, where she tells him of her visions. And with the support of the king, she inspired a French victory at Orleans. She's known as sometimes as the Maid of Orleans, which was a town that the English had put under siege. At this point, this really kind of rallied support for her, created an increased morale for the French. There's a whole longer story involved with Joan of Arc. Some of y'all, when we start talking about next week, the next round of papers for you, that would probably be a good one for some of y'all. But it is incredible story of a 17-year-old peasant girl who is basically seeing the king, and the king goes along with her, and she's at the head of an army basically. She would eventually fall in the hands of the English. She was actually betrayed. And they would put her on trial for witchcraft, and they would wind up burning her at the stake. I do have that in your notes. She is now a saint. She wound up actually being sainted. She's a saint in the Catholic Church. But that's the little brief part of Joan in your notes. As always, a lot of times some of these figures I try to go along with what the book does, but I wish I had some more information to talk about her on. But the French ultimately get most of their lands back during the 100 Years' War. But the effects of the 100 Years' War, I have that on the back on the second page on the back. The 100 Years' War deeply affected the French and the English people. France suffered more simply because all the fighting was on their soil. So that should be easy to remember. I have that in your notes. So that would make sense. All the fighting, so their lands are damaged, their people are damaged. The civilian casualty this causes, the refugees, so forth. And the war did lead, though, to a new sense of unity for the French. For the English, the defeat led to bitterness among the nobles who had lost French lands. So they were upset about losing those lands. And they were upset. That's never good during the system, the way the English were set up, for the nobles to be upset and embittered about something. The 100 Years' War hastened the decline of feudalism for two particular reasons. There were several, but two in particular I'll put in your notes. The longbow and then firearms are coming along at the same time, made feudal warfare based on the use of castles and mounted knights outdated. So that's one thing that you would need to know. And then the other is monarchs started replacing feudal soldiers with national armies made up of hired soldiers. So instead of the lords that owed, their loyalty to the king, and then the people under them, the lords would acquire men and make their army for the king when they needed it, they started creating essentially, professional armies that were made up of hired soldiers. So that started the decline of feudalism. Those are the two main reasons. I do have those two listed in your notes. You're going to need to know that. For France during the late 1400s, France's monarchy won much power and prestige. One of their more famous kings, Louis